All right, let's go back in the huddle. Ben Solak from ESPN, my old colleague. Ben, how you doing today, man? Let's talk some NFL.
Well, it's the first week in a long time where I've got usual tempo, right? I've got games to prepare for. You got Thursday night, Monday night. Like it's good to be back in the saddle.
We got a big blockbuster trade over the weekend with Micah Parsons being traded from the Cowboys to the Packers. You wrote a great article on ESPN about that titled "Why the Packers Need Micah Parsons and How He Fits Their Defense." I read through that over the weekend, and it's become apparent to me that this is exactly what the Packers needed. Like, this is
Mhm.
number one, what they were missing from their team. Can you explain why Parsons would have been, like, of all the players in the NFL, why Parsons is probably the guy they would have traded for of anybody?
Yeah, the Packers have been an interesting team last couple of years because they the Jordan Love transition, Aaron Rodgers, Matt LaFleur is this great coach. Their offense is always good. They haven't had a ton of postseason success for it though, and one of the reasons why is because defensively they've been lacking in stars, and then they also had a scheme switch. So they've really been trying to find a solution on defense to not be like the 15th best unit in football, but to really be closer to the fifth best unit in football. Because we talk a lot about January football, postseason football relative to regular season ball, and they're a lot more different than people realize in terms of the stars you need, the guys who can take over games for you, and also the limits on coaching staffs. It's really easy to scheme up wins against the middle tier teams in the NFL, right? If you are a good coach and you are good on the chalkboard, you can beat the other coaches on the chalkboard with insufficient talent, right? The Packers with Malik Willis, backup quarterback, and beat the Colts last year by just like running option stuff, right? You can scheme around it in September and October. You start to get into January football and scheme reaches a water's edge. You need guys who can tip the field, who really actually change the scales and change the math of football. That player, Michael Parsons, is one of the few, right? There's not a long list of guys. Parsons is one of them. People think of him as, oh, another good pass rusher. No, like he has led the league in pressure rate since he has gotten into the league. He has led the league in quarterback hits since he got into the league. It is very, very easy to argue that he is better than Myles Garrett over the last 4 years and certainly over the next couple of years as Parsons is younger and kind of enters his prime. So this is a math changing player for them. The Packers went 0-4 last year against the Vikings and the Lions in their division, both on playoff teams. They went 0-2 against the Eagles, lost once in the regular season, lost once in the postseason. They need to beat those teams. And to do that, they need to get blue chip guys. Michael Parsons is a blue chip guy at a position at which it's not like they had good players and moved up a little bit. No, like they had a big hole at edge rusher in general. So this is a playoff oriented change, right? Parsons is not going to walk in and like dramatically reinvent the Packers in September. He just got here 4 days ago. But by the time January rolls around, they want to be a different style of defense, a different sort of threat than they've been in years past.
You mentioned those losses they had last season against the Lions and the Vikings. Goff had a 79% completion percentage, 59% success rate. Darnold had
Mhm.
a 75% completion percentage, 62% success rate.
Good
And
days in
you
the
wrote,
office, man.
yeah,
Good
yeah,
days. Yeah.
exactly. Those are great numbers. And you mentioned how they had extremely low early down pressure rates
Mhm.
in those matchups. Now, that's where Parsons, I would assume, you're thinking early down pressure, he's going to ramp it up, have to blitz less. And then in later downs, you wrote in the article about how the Packers use a lot of simulated pressures.
Yeah.
Now, if you're forcing teams into second and long, could you also use some of these simulated pressures earlier in downs, therefore ramping up pressure even more?
Yeah, 100%. Because your menu changes depending on what you think you're going to get from the opposing offense. And in a second and long, you're very likely expecting a drop back. There's going to be some teams that'll be willing to run it and get to a third and less long. And that's that's your team scouting, right? That's your opponent week by week. But the thing about the NFL and coaching it and calling plays in it that gets under discussed is how very different first and 10 is from third and X, right? Like you every single coach has their play calls on their sheet broken down by down and distance, right? Here are our first and 10 calls. Here are our second and long calls, second medium calls, second and short calls. Here are our third and long calls, third and medium calls, third and short calls. And I'm not, breaking news here when I tell you the defense's favorite calls are the third and long ones. Those are the ones where they're at the greatest advantage because they know you got to drop back and they're pretty confident how far down the field you need to get. Again, some teams will go for more fourth downs. And so, on a third and 8, okay, we have to worry about, them gaining even 6 yards because they might go for that fourth and 2. But in general, once I get you to third and long, I know so much more about what you have to do as an offense that it allows me to call designer plays. And I'm on the forefoot now. I'm the one who's dictating, and you have to deal with what I'm going to throw your way. That's not true on first and 10. First and 10, the whole menu is available to the offense. And so the defense has to be more passive. The defense has to be more accommodating and accepting, right? There's certainly some coaches who say, screw it, right? Like Brian Flores with the Vikings, Vance Joseph with the Broncos. There's some guys who are like, we shoot. And those are some high variance defenses. But in general, first and 10, the offense is on the forefoot. If I have a guy like Micah Parsons who can take a standard first and 10 drop back, just wax that opposing left tackle, get a pressure, get a forced incompletion, maybe get a sack, but get me to a second and 10, boom. I've just opened my menu to the simulated pressures. Their new defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, such a good menu of creative pressures, creative blitzes, but I can only get to it if my defense can get me to second and long, can get me to third and long. And when you have a player like Parsons, you're going to create more of those second, third and longs. It's going to magnify the value of what Hafley brought to the table. So the players will get you to the good down and distances, and then Hafley will do the job out scheming the coach on third and long.
One of the things I thought was most interesting in your breakdown of it was the EPA per snap against dropbacks versus the success rate against dropbacks last season for the Packers. They were second in the NFL with an EPA per snap against dropbacks, which means it weights third down stops, turnovers, sacks, and everything like that. They had a lot of successful plays, but they were last in the NFL with success rate against dropbacks at 50.7%. Can you explain that discrepancy with the Packers defense last season between why they were creating some of those, big highlight plays versus the fact that if you remove the weights, they were actually worse than the NFL against dropbacks? It's kind of crazy to me why it's such a dramatic difference.
So the best way to understand EPA and success rate, how the two can be so disparate, in my opinion, is to make a poker analogy, which is when you're playing poker, if you want to get involved in big pots, if you want to get in those spots where there's going to be a lot of money on the table and you have a chance to win a lot of money, then you have to be anting up. You got to be putting in blinds, obviously, but then you also have to be, raising before the flop, right? You got to be putting money into those pots. You're going to have to lose a little and lose a little and lose a little and lose a little, lose a little. Because when the flop doesn't come your way, the turn doesn't come your way, when your bluff gets picked up, then all those progressive loss. Well, suddenly you've got the nuts, and then there's an enormous win, right? You take down the big pot, and overall you're in the green, despite the fact that, you were there, trickling down to the red for quite some time. This is how we think about EPA and success rate. EPA, you can have a drive where you're not even getting to third down, right? It's first and 10, second and 4, first and 10, second and 3, first and 10, second and 2. They're just walking down the field on you. But then all of a sudden, you get a pick inside your own 20, and the EPA shoots through the moon. Because think about that on that drive, they were expected to score, 4 points, 5 points, 6 points, field goal, certainly maybe a touchdown, and you took all of that away on one play. So that one EPA per play looks enormous. And on a per drive perspective, it's always high EPA per drive as well for the defense because they had a big takeaway. They forced 0 points for the offense. But from a success rate perspective, how many good plays did you have on that drive? They weren't good. None of them were good until that one big one. And that was the case with the Packers defense. So when we look for defenses that are primed for regression in the following year, we look for defenses that had an extremely fat turnover EPA, a big fat sack EPA. These big splash plays came in these huge moments in close games, in the fourth quarter, in the red zone. But from a snap to snap perspective, they were bending, and trying not to break, trying to then find that one big play. So the Bills with this defense last year, there's a lot of suspicion on the Bills defense. The Packers with a sort of a defense last year, and I had plenty of suspicions about them. Corner room doesn't look so good. Can they scheme it up again in year 2? And then they added Michael Parsons. It's like, oh, okay, no, never mind. Right? Again, field tipping, math changing player, Michael Parsons.
I'd imagine the Packers internally felt the same way too, which is why they obviously go out and get Micah Parsons. It's interesting though, because with Parsons, there's a lot of people that are skeptical about him that say, he's overrated. He's not the best defensive player in football. He's too weak against the run. Jerry Jones, obviously saying they'll be better without him. Now, can you explain to me why there are those skeptics of Parsons? What is it that they see in his game that makes them believe that he is not this player that you kind of detailed him to be for the Packers?
It's the fact that he's the current player in the headlines right now. If it were Myles Garrett, there would be a loud but ridiculous vocal minority saying, well, actually, Myles Garrett this. And if it were TJ Watt who got traded, it would be a loud, ridiculous vocal minority saying, well, actually, TJ Watt that. I think it's mostly just our desire to be contrarian on the internet that leads to, kind of the movement to be like, oh, hey, actually this elite player is not this good, right? We have a joke in the football space, like a lot of the football nerd writers, where we say the most underrated player in football is Patrick Mahomes, just because people are always trying to find ways to poke holes in the guy, and it's like, no, he just is that. It's gold chip, it's above blue chip, it just is what he is. In the case of Parsons specifically, the Cowboys' run defense has been bad, and Micah Parsons was on that team, and so if you want to, you can be like, well, if so, that it's because of it, right? Parsons was there, the run defense was bad. Parsons should be a better run defender. And it's like, certainly he could be a better run defender. It would come at the expense of a lot of his pressures and his sacks. And we know for a fact, we have tons of data it's way better to be a high pressure player and a high sack player than to be a high run defender, right? In terms of your individual impact on the field. Obviously, if you're selling out for it, sometimes you're leaving your teammates behind you up the creek without a paddle, and that's a coaching thing. You got to calibrate it. But in general, like if you are going to at times give up runs your direction, but the payoff is that you're going to be able to win one-on-ones and generate sacks on your own. Yeah, I mean, like it is worth it from a EPA perspective, from a success rate perspective, but simply from a team building perspective, we know that it's worth it like 10 times out of 10. So you can do some performative Parsons run defense, like distaste if you want, like, some little concern trolling. It's not real. He's one of the best defensive players in football. It's as simple as that.
I mean, I think there's like no perfect player, and you can
Mhm.
always poke holes in any particular player. Like everybody has a flaw. I mean, obviously, Cowboys, if they're also Mavericks fans, tough year. I mean, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
like this sucks. Really a tough year for you. But people did the same thing when Luca was traded by the Mavericks earlier this year. Nico Harrison himself, all the leaks about Luca being out of shape, not what he should be defensively. It's like, well, yeah, if he's giving 150% effort on defense, maybe he's not quite the all-time great talent that he is on offense. You need to
right.
give some in order to maximize your greatest strengths. So I think it's similar with any type of star player that gets traded, to your point. Now, with that said, you got Jerry Jones up there at the podium talking about their run defense, talking about how they'll be better. The Nico Harrison with the Mavericks said how they're going to be championship contenders and all that. And in the NBA space, people have talked about the Mavericks and they're like, well, if Anthony Davis stays healthy, if Kyrie Irving comes back from his torn ACL, if Cooper Flag is great as a rookie, if the Mavericks could be really good. With the Cowboys, do you think there's any chance that Jerry Jones is proven right here? The Cowboys are better. They win the NFC East. Like they have a good year. Do you think there's any chance that the Cowboys exceed expectations here and Jerry Jones is proven right?
This year, I'd be stunned just because of like just the state of the rest of the roster. They have injuries at linebacker and corner that are going to limit the team. Offensive line's gotten banged up in camp as well. Brian Schottenheimer is the first time head coach there, and that was a little bit of an uninspiring hire. So this year, I'd be surprised. They do have a young player at edge rusher, Donovan Azaraku, a second rounder out of BC, who was a great draft prospect, and people were very excited about. And he's had a good camp, and so he's now stepping into a much bigger percentage of the pie, a bigger part of the snaps than he would have been if Parsons were there. And so there's worlds where Azaraku looks like a big hit in year one. And then, okay, he's not a Micah Parsons caliber player, but hey, like we've still got good edge rusher presence. We're still getting the quarterback down. And then they've got 2 more first round picks. And I think you can get to a world where the Cowboys quickly reload and rebuild if they hit in those 2 first round picks. One of the issues is that the Packers, 5 of the last 6 Packers first round picks have been inside the 20s, right? It had been in the back third of the first round. The only time it wasn't, right, they had the one bad year laying off last year of Aaron Rodgers before they went to Jordan Love, and they picked 15 overall in that draft. So the Packers are a historically solid franchise who then also, are probably going to have a couple more peak seasons now they have Parsons in the building. So these first round picks might be like 29, 30, 31, dare I say 32. That pick's not very valuable. Like it's nice to say first round. It feels better, but in the NFL draft, I imagine the NBA draft is even a bigger exponential drop off. But in the NFL draft, man, like the difference between the value of pick 5 and pick 25 is enormous in terms of the caliber of player you're getting. And so there's worlds where it can look better later, right? Maybe use these first round picks in trades, Azaraku hits, and the team rebounds. But I would be flabbergasted if we're coming back in a year saying like, man, shedding Micah Parsons really helped the Dallas Cowboys unlock their defense. Like that just is 2 plus 2 equals 5 to me. I don't see how we get there.
Yeah, I feel the same exact way with Luca and the Mavericks. It's
Mhm.
like it feels like cope for the most part. It's
Always.
just cope, and I think it's just at the end of the day, it's just a major bummer for those Dallas fans that they lose these 2 star players in a
Go
year. But
turn
it
on some
really
Paige
does.
Checkers and have a good time. All right. You gotta
Oh,
switch sports.
who knows how long it'll be with her too? You know. So look, man, it does show how fickle it all is. Like roster turnover happens so fast. Players come and go in all sports. So it's like you got to enjoy the players when you have them. Speaking about, you mentioned the Packers with their quarterback change, Jordan Love still hopefully ascending for them. The Vikings have a quarterback change this season with JJ McCarthy now starting. So the Vikings, they go 14-3 last season. Sam Darnold has a solid year. They have a wild card round loss in the playoffs. On paper, it feels to me that JJ McCarthy is one of like the biggest swing players in the NFL. If he's good, Vikings could be even better this season. If he's not quite, what they're expecting, the Vikings could be an underwhelming team. Is that accurate to say that JJ McCarthy is one of the biggest swing players in the NFL?
100%. I think it's difficult to find one even more, and I think the guys who you would like put in there are the other second year quarterbacks, right? Like maybe Caleb Williams is there, Jaden Daniels, but JJ for sure. And this Vikings incubator, right? When we talk about young quarterbacks starting the NFL, we talk about the environment in which they land, the offensive line they're playing behind, the running game that they can lean on, the wide receivers they can throw to, and the coach calling plays for them. This incubator is about as good as any you've ever seen, right? In terms of they just brought Adam Thielen back to join. Jordan Addison, he returns from suspension, and Justin Jefferson. They completely retooled the interior offensive line to be able to run the football better, acquired Jordan Mason in trade to be able to hand the ball off more consistently. And then Kevin O'Connor has just proven himself over the last few years to be one of the best at scheming around a quarterback, not just the Sam Darnold games, but the Josh Dobbs games, some of the Nick Mullins games. So it's like, all right, I have a limited guy out there. Here's what he can do. Here's what he can't do. I'm going to keep him in his good spots where his bread is buttered. I'm going to hide him from some of the bad stuff. Like he's really to me elevated himself into the McVay Shanahan tier of like, oh, you do this every single week. I can set my watch to you being just like better on the offensive side of the ball than the opposing defensive coordinator is. And so when we talk about quarterbacks developing the NFL, we very often say things, right? Like zip code kind of determines who you're going to be. Destination is destiny, right? We like to think that we can evaluate the quarterbacks and figure out who's the best ones and who should be a first rounder, who's a back half of the first rounder, who's the fourth best. But coming out of the draft, it's really hard. And a lot of times, whether or not a guy succeeds or fails is dictated by his environment. And so this Viking season is really going to put that theory to the test for us because McCarthy coming off of the knee injury and filling like weirdly big Sam Darnold shoes, right? Sam was so good for them last year and they let him walk in free agency. But he's got such a good nucleus around him, such a good environment that it's hard to imagine him not developing and getting protected early and not having to do too much in the offense, getting his sea legs under him, getting confident. And then as he grows in NFL speed, NFL tempo, starts to feel things better. Yeah, I mean, this offense should be able to work around him and keep that on ramp nice, stable, and smooth. And so I have high expectations for McCarthy because of the environment in which he's landed.
Yeah, it feels like they could be a Super Bowl contender if he's good right away.
Yep.
With that environment, you mentioned Jordan Mason as an acquisition for the Vikings this year. How do you expect that backfield to kind of be split up with Aaron Jones, who had a big workload last year for
Yeah.
the Vikings? I'd imagine closer to 50-50 between those two.
That's what everybody says. Now, 50-50 never actually happens because a lot of it like it'll happen over the course of a season, but not in the course of a game. So we'll walk into a game saying, "Oh, we like these four runs, and those were, we like Jordan Mason on the interior stuff and on the gap power stuff. Oh, but we want to be a quick passing team in this game because they're a quick pressure team. So now this is the Aaron Jones game. So we want to get it out fast and throw in the ball behind the line of scrimmage." So it's never like 50-50 in a game. That tends to be like a myth, but it can be 50-50 for the course of the season. And that's where I would guess this ends up being. Aaron Jones is also older. Aaron Jones typically misses a few games every season. He's a nagging injury sort of a guy. And so you just want to have a better RB2 in general. I'm going to guess that, yeah, when we look back at the end of the season, right, it's 600 snaps to 500 snaps. But game to game, they'll flow it depending on what matchups they like.
The 49ers got some good news over the weekend with Jawan Jennings returning back to practice for them. And now with the 49ers a few weeks ago, it seemed like they had nobody in their wide receiver room at all. Ricky Pearsall seems to be shining in training camp. Brandon Ayuk will be back in week 6. Do you think for the 49ers, their wide receiver room is suddenly less concerning, or do you still have hesitations there?
I still have hesitations, right? We have, again, like I brought up Kyle Shanahan's name earlier. He's in that echelon of offensive coordinators where I just kind of expect you to work around it. But this has been Ayuk and Deebo Samuel for quite some time, right? For the last 3-4 years, that's been the wide receiver room there. And so anytime there's change, there's an opportunity for a drop off. We saw big Jawan Jennings games last year, and he's been a great wide receiver 3 for them for a while when Deebo and Ayuk have been banged up. But we know from like a talent perspective that this is not the same caliber of a mover and athlete that we have in Ayuk and Debo. So he's a useful player. He's not as dynamic of a player. Pearsall's the big one, right? Where it's, listen, like you were a first round pick at wide receiver last season. It was not a high impact player. He was very low routes. And all of a sudden, last 2 games of the season, bam, he explodes. And a lot of that success was all about man coverage, just running man beaters and him running away from guys. He's got to be able to be more reliable against zone and be quarterback friendly. And Brock's got to trust him. A lot of this offense is timing throws against zone coverage. And you really have to have a good connection, quarterback to wide receiver, to make that work. And so Pearsall's the one who has like a lot of leverage. If he walks out and can be a wide receiver 1, that leaves more Jawan Jennings as the wide receiver 2. And that orientation makes sense to me. Pearsall's not ready for that load. I don't think they have a guy who really scares you for 4 quarters. And you brought up Ayuk coming back, and week 6 is when they're targeting off the pup list. But we got to remember, Ayuk, and in week 7 injured his knee last year. He tore the ACL and the MCL. And then I think there's also PCL damage and meniscus damage. I might have my blank CLs wrong there, but there were four things involved. And when you have a knee injury that traumatic, you tend not to be the same guy the next season. That tends to be a multi-year recovery. You get back 1 year and then you get fully back to yourself, right, athletically in the second year. And so I don't have big expectations for IU this year at all. That was not oh, I tore my ACL. I'll see you guys again in 13 months. So that was a brutal knee injury. We typically see those guys not be high impact players in the season back.
Seems like a lot of ifs, not to mention McCaffrey, his injury history as well with the 49ers. I mean, from my, trying to get back into the NFL this year, to me, from the outside looking in, it feels like the NFC West is probably one of the harder divisions to figure out. Geno Smith leaving the Seahawks. You have, obviously, the 49ers with their issues, Stafford, the back issue with the Rams. I mean, like, what should my expectations be with that division this year in the NFC West? Because, or are you feeling the same as me?
It's going to be week 13, and they're all going to be 7-6 or 6-7, and we're going to have 14 different playoff if this then that. This team wins everything. I felt good about a Rams pick until the whole Stafford yeah, we think he's going to play week 1. Yeah, he has practiced like twice. He's 36 years old with a back. Like every 36-year-old I know has a back. None of them are trying to play NFL football. Their left tackle.
He's always had injuries though, right? Like, isn't that a positive for him?
Right. They're like a golden rule of NFL is like, do not trust the 30-year-olds with lingering injuries, right? Yeah. Like, it's just like, this is a brutal sport. They can't keep doing it. But Stafford's one of the guys who just walks out there with like his left arm hanging down and just like makes fourth down plays. It's like, so you want to believe. And so I'm interested in the Rams. The left tackle also, Larry Jackson, had blood clots over the summer. And so they don't know how active he will be, how healthy he will be. So they've got big injury question marks. The Niners could be very good, and everybody who's pro Niners, right? I would say that's the chalk pick for the division right now. It talks about a schedule, right? It looks like from Vegas strength of schedule right now, it's the second easiest schedule for any team, and that tends to be a pretty sticky stat, and it's like substantially easier than average. Like, it's a big second place. And so the hope is that, right, like, this schedule ends up being pretty good, and then the Niners can figure things out over time, because that defense is extremely young. They've lost so much talent on that side of the ball the last couple of years. They have a new defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh, who is the role defensive coordinator, but you're installing a new system with a ton of young players. And so I think it can be rocky for the Niners early, and then maybe they're good when we get to the back half of the season. If the Rams can get 13 games out of Stafford, I think they win the division, but I won't know that until we get to the 17th game of the season, and I don't think Stafford will know that until we get there either. So your guess is as good as mine.
The game I'm most looking forward to this weekend is Ravens-Bills Sunday Night Football, rematch of their divisional round matchup last year. Are you picking either of these teams to win the Super Bowl this year?
Yes, I picked the Ravens. I only picked the Ravens because I was a coward. I had the Texans in the AFC, and then I changed it at the last second because
Is it a coward move to pick the Ravens, though, when they fall short in the playoffs every year?
It is not, because they're so good, Kevin, and they got to win one, right? I mean, like, it's law of big numbers, and they're an amazing team. The AFC is tricky because the year that a team finally ousts the Chiefs and makes it the playoffs, we will all say, oh, obviously, finally, this had to happen. Of course, like, this was always going to happen. But also, every year that the Chiefs hold a team off and they go again, we say, oh, obviously, well, of course, this was going to happen. And that's because these teams are just very, very good. We have been inured to it, and we've lost the intensity of it. But it's very important to remember that, without question, the best three teams in football all play in the AFC, right? I mean, the Eagles were amazing last year. Do not get me wrong. They won the Super Bowl. They went through the NFC. The best three teams in football, walking in every single season, are the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens, right? In terms of on the chalkboard, what these teams can do. The Chiefs, obviously, last year, like, never got the explosive play, and they fell off a little bit. But, like, the Bills and the Ravens, despite the fact that they have no hardware to show for it whatsoever, I promise you, they're that good. And we just don't feel that way because they play in the same conference as the Chiefs, and the Chiefs have been so tough to topple. So I don't think it's a coward move to pick the Ravens, but I've also done it every season, and every smart NFL analyst wants to do it because we all want to believe in this team, and the numbers tell us they're very good. And so I was looking for a more contrarian pick. But yeah, Bills and Ravens, this is a good year for it. Chiefs defense is really young, but again, every year's a good year for it. They can never get it done.
You were at Bills camp last month in August. Is there anything you saw from them that made you lean Ravens over Bills in this situation?
Not from a training camp, but I talked to the defensive end, Greg Rousseau, who got a big extension, and he brought up the Ravens game that they played in the playoffs explicitly because defensively, they're trying to modernize a little bit on that side of the ball, which is a really, really, really big deal for them. Sean McDermott has been their coach for 8 seasons now. I want to 2017. What year is it? 2025? Yeah, eight seasons. And McDermott is a very line them up and play coach, right? McDermott is all about execution. It's all about effort and tackling, right? So we put our 4 down, we rush the 4. We put our 7 in coverage, we drop a 7. We just execute you. And the Bills are so good at doing that against all of the average teams, and all the decent teams, and all the bad teams. And then they get to the postseason, and Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson sits back there and just works them for 4 quarters. Because again, January football is different. Eventually, the other guys are as good as you are at executing, and then you need to have some, schematic curveballs. You need to be able to throw some new stuff at them they haven't seen on film. And the Bills have always struggled for that. So I was talking with Rousseau because they were doing different fronts in training camp. They're 5 down fronts, lining them up on the inside, and he was like, "Yeah, like go back and watch our game against the Ravens in the playoffs. We had to run like bigger fronts and more guys on the front because of the way the Ravens load up the line of scrimmage and they can run out of 22 personnel, right? 2 running backs, 2 tight ends. They get super heavy. We needed to be able to respond to that. And so Buffalo is modernizing on defense a little bit in response to what this Ravens offense has become, a little bit in response to some of the disappointing postseason departures where this defense just hasn't been able to buy a stop. I'm excited to see what that looks like, especially in week 1. Like they've had a lot of time to watch Ravens film and a lot of time to say these are the fronts we want against these sorts of runs against Derrick Henry, against Lamar Jackson. So there's innovation happening in Buffalo that we've got to heat check, because if it's real, then that might change the team's postseason hopes a little bit.
Did you watch any college football over the weekend?
I did. I did not watch a snap of UNC TCU last night because it was too sad for me. I knew it was going to be rough and I wasn't going to enjoy it, but I watched most of it. Yeah.
Yeah, poor Belichick. Poor Belichick. It started out so great. A perfect first drive. I'm feeling good.
I'm looking. No poor Belichick from me. He made his bed. He can lie.
I totally understand. The Air Jordan sign that was out there at the tailgate was very funny. That was hilarious. But
I appreciated how excited North Carolina was for it. But someone had to have in the building been like, dude, what if we lose by like a lot? And then someone else was like, don't worry about it, we'll be fine. It was a tough luck there as the chips fell.
Well, Belichick had the interview before the game, and he was asked about 34 years to the day he made his NFL head coaching debut with the Browns. And he's like, "Well, I hope this goes a lot better than that one did." It did not.
Yeah,
it did not.
That's a classic Belichick line, though, right? Like when he would lose bad games to the Patriots, he'd be like, "What happened?" He'd be like, "We were bad." Like he's never once won for like the sugarcoating of it. Like I'm sure how he felt was like, "I hope this is better than it was."
We got to coach better. We got to coach
and then
better.
He moves on to
we got to play better. Yeah, of course. That's all. It's a classic Belichick. And then Arch Manning on Saturday as well did not have a good game. Of course, there's a big social media reaction to him. Memes were created of him on Saturday. Look, I think, he's a redshirt sophomore. He's basically a junior right now. Obviously, he's hyped up as the next big thing. He's, son of Cooper Manning, nephew of Eli and Peyton. Of course, the hype is out of this world. People saying it's like Shedeur Sanders and Bronny James, yada, yada, this and that. I still think like he went against the defending national champions. He went against a great defense. He's still 21 is older for college, but it's still young in quarterback development. To me, it's just one game. Like, let's chill out a little bit here. If this continues happening, where he's making poor reads, well, then we can get really, really crazy here with like, okay, definitely needs to go back to school. Definitely not ready to the NFL. But what was your take on the Arch Manning debut?
Yeah, 100% agree. Right. He played his first ever game. He played it in Ohio State. He played it poorly. He played it with a ton of hype and pomp and circumstance and the last name and the excitement and everything like that. And he wilted in the moment. Right. It skipped his first pass. And then after that, it just felt like he was, shaky, unconfident, uncertain the rest of the way. Yeah, man. We've all done it. Like, I don't know, like that first time I met my now wife's parents, I was nervous and I, was like stuttering over my words and I didn't feel great. And then the second time I was a little better, the third time was a little better. And eventually we got hitched, like, it's like, that's what's a big moment to do, and so I don't fault the kid for it. It sucks that it happens in this context where there's so much build up for it. Everyone's excited to see it. So now, right, it becomes a week worth of memes and you got to have the right people around you and you have to have good mental fortitude and whatever. But I'm not moving stock up, stock down Arch Manning on my 2027 draft board just yet. We'll let the chips fall and then we'll actually see what the young man's got.
I mean, look, I lived it with the other Mannings. Two of the worst days of my life was Eli Manning winning the Super Bowl for the Giants against my Patriots. And Peyton Manning, look, the Patriots definitely dominated him in the early 2000s. Belichick's defenses confused him, made this genius quarterback look normal, but then he won. And then he won again. It just happens. Like we see this with great athletes over time. They take a while to win. This is your argument for Lamar Jackson, right? Eventually, he's going to win one. Happened with
Yeah.
Alex Rodriguez in baseball. He loses, he struggles in the playoffs for years, and then he dominates one year in the playoffs with the Yankees. He goes on to win a World Series. It happens time and time and time again, unless it doesn't. Like sometimes there are great athletes that never win one, and then there's great athletes, that take a while to develop. It never happens all the time right away in their first game. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It did not look good in game one for Arch Manning with him kind of sidearming some of those throws. But Ben, I look forward to this NFL season. I appreciate you joining me today, man. It was great talking with you. I think this is our first pod together. We were
Yeah.
colleagues for a few years at the Ringer, but I don't think we ever did a pod together.
First time with the mics on. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
but no, thanks for having me on. It's like I said, it's good to be back in the saddle. Always feels nice when NFL season starts. I'll hate it by like week 5. I'm like, man, I remember sleeping. But right now it's good to be home.
Hey, I appreciate you joining me today, Ben. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kev.
You can now watch the Kevin O'Connor Show on the Yahoo Sports Network, our first ever streaming TV channel. The Yahoo Sports Network is available to stream on all leading FAST services. It's also streaming live 24/7 on yahoosports.tv, where you can catch all the shows on your phone or your browser.